the most?
Standing on one leg.
Yes.
It was a campaign designed to highlight the plight of Soviet Jews.
So can you start again? Can you say the 35s?
Right. The 35s campaign, it was the 35s women's campaign for Soviet Jewry, was designed to highlight the plight of Soviet Jews, those who wanted to emigrate to Israel and those who wanted to be able to live as Jews.
And who were the 35s in the campaign?
The 35s were a group of Jewish, today we would say girls, women, who helped, who wanted to be involved in assisting the cause. And it was a cause, it became more and more involved, and who were people who might have been in professions, might have been working, but who were largely in those years housewives.
Can you tell me about when you first heard about Silva Zamenson or the Leningrad trial, and how did it affect you?
The Leningrad trials and Silva Zalmanson, who was the female involved in the Leningrad trials, had an enormous effect on me, because I believed and still believe, and I have just come back from Poland and Auschwitz, that every Jew should have fought. They should have physically fought against the Germans. Now, it might not have ended up well for them, but it might have helped a few more people. They shouldn't have just walked like lambs to the slaughterhouse. And Silva Zalmanson, for me, she stood up, and she was my idol, because she did what I believed I would have done had I been in her position. And particularly in what she did, because it was so hard, it was so difficult, because she was doing something that was testing the law. She was testing, even if she was didn't have full access to newspapers and information and news, she knew that she was testing the law. In other words, she was using a difficult medium to highlight her plight.
What did you know about it? Because at that time you didn't have as much information as, so I'm guessing, okay. So I'm guessing you knew, like, you had a little bit of false information at time to time. But wait 1 second with the answer,
yeah.
Because we're already with the sound. There was an airplane. We thought we got rid of the airplanes yesterday, right? They're following us. Because, you know, my mom lives next to
oh, right.
Tel Aviv.
Oh, right. So how did you handle it?
It was okay, but then there was an alarm. Okay. So, how can you tell me? Can you talk a little bit about the fact that you didn't have sometimes you didn't have all the information, but you still trusted, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, one of our difficulties was getting information and having confidence that the information that we acquired was to be trusted. So we double and triple checked everything. Remember, no cell phones, no computers. We relied on telephone boxes in the street, and we relied on the telephone. So we were in touch right from the beginning with Jews in the Soviet Union. We had a few telephone numbers, and we acquired information from people in Israel. And we put snippets together and gradually built a picture up of how the Leningrad group planned what they wanted to do, how they gathered their courage to go and do what they wanted to do, and then what happened when they actually reached the airport. And then, of course, the trials. So it was all a question of putting little snippets together in order to build a picture.
What was your part in the group, in the 35s?
The 35s started with a very small group of people who had heard, had read and had heard people speaking on the subject. You know, it was the beginning of opening up of the subject. So we read the press, we read basic information, and I agreed to be one of those first people who started the group. And we planned together the first demonstration, which was sitting in front of the Soviet embassy. And we decided that we didn't have a name. We went to the Soviet embassy, sat in front. We decided that we were going to hold a 24-hour hunger strike, which was unheard of. You have to understand that today, everybody's accustomed to hunger strikes and to demonstrations, but in those days there were very few demonstrations, and certainly there were no demonstrations of women, and certainly not a group of Jewish women. So we decided that we were going to wear black, and that idea came out of following the women in South Africa who had worn a black sash. And we copied the concept and wore black, decided on the 24-hour demonstration, sat on the streets very tidily in rows of chairs, decided that we wanted to have 35 women because for the age of a 35-year-old prisoner. And then started doing our publicity, because from the beginning we knew that we had to do every single thing that would catch the eye of the photographer and the journalist, in order that they would say to us, why are you doing this? And we would be able to say to them, we are standing here because of a girl called Sylva Salmonson who has, and give them the story. And my role from the beginning was handling the PR. And we were very lucky. I mean, just amazing. By the entrance to all of the embassies were 2 red telephone boxes, London telephone boxes, back to back. So I could make 2 calls at the same time. I could stand in one, run to the next one, run back to the next one whilst I was holding on. And it was as if the Soviet embassy had given us a service. And that was our form of telephoning.
Can we fix
But
your bracelet?
can I just tell you how we got a name? We called in that period. When one called a newspaper, somebody would answer news desk, and I would tell the story of what was happening, 35 girls sitting on the street on a hunger strike. And after about 4 or 5 telephone calls to one paper, the same guy answering, he turned round and said to his mate, oh, it's those 35s again. And I went to the girls and I said, girls, we've got a name. In other words, he gave us the name.
I would like to talk a little bit about, did you know what was happening with the Soviet Jews before the Leningrad trial? Not just you, but in general.
Yeah. I would say in general, no. I did because I was specifically interested, so I was following, I was trying to find out information. But in general, I don't think people were aware of what was happening. And once people found out, it was almost a miracle that Jews in that quantity existed. And the second miracle was to hear that Jews wanted to come out. When we first went to the embassy, I think it's important, we knocked on the door, and a guy came to the door, and we said we would like to speak to the ambassador and about the subject of Soviet Jews. We were concerned for somebody called Sylva Salmonson, for Reza Palatnik, etc. And the guy said, but there are no Jews in the Soviet Union. That was the first reply. Police took us back down the road. Went back again later. We said, we want to talk to the ambassador. And the second reply from the same man was, any Jews who are in the Soviet Union don't want to leave. They love the Soviet Union. And the third reply, because we went back again, and the third reply was, well, if you make an appointment, we'll talk to you maybe about specific cases, but we assure you any information you've got is wrong. In other words, they were sort of almost prepared by this stage for us. And we had gathered, like I said, little snippets, and that almost fitted into the picture that the government was denying the existence of Soviet Jews, or the problem.
So there were lots of people, prisoners of conscience, before the group of Leningrad trial, and some of them were also sentenced to death, and some of them were in prison for 30 years. Why do you think the world reacted so strongly, specifically after the Leningrad trial?
Well, first of all, I think that more information was already out. And secondly, I think that, and I was very conscious of this myself, that I never wanted to get a Soviet Jew into trouble. So, and I felt always that we who campaigned were responding to what the Soviet Jews were doing. We weren't the initiators. The initiators were Soviet Jews. And in response to their actions and therefore pleas for help, we responded. I think that previously we hadn't heard those pleas. They may have been made, but we didn't hear them.
So, can you think about the most interesting activity, demonstration that you did with the 35s?
I think the most, for me, the most motivating one was when we had a big prisoner lunch. We did it in England, and then we did it afterwards in Israel. And Ingrid Bergman helped us. And Ingrid was, well, she acted as your mother.
Oh, can you say that again? She acted as Silva Zalmanson, because I'm not in the film.
Right,
yeah.
Right. When we invited Ingrid Bergman to participate, we told her about Silva Zalmanson, and she agreed to take on the role of Silva. And we had a large lunch, and we bought and kept herring till it became dry and rather nasty, and the same with bread. And we allocated and we decorated a huge place as a sort of prison, as closely as we could. And for me, that when Ingrid Bergman stood up and talked about your mother, your Silva Zalmanson.
Oh, just a second.
Yeah.
ויטלי, זה גרוע כמו שזה נשמע לי הסאונד?
מה,
יש בחוץ בלגן, אצלך הכל בסדר?
שומעים כביש, לא, אמרתי לך,
שומעים כביש, וזה מפריע, זה יותר חזק מהקול שלה, כאילו...
לא, זה לא, שומעים ברקע כביש, כאילו,
אוקיי, זה ממש ברקע.
אתם רואים פנים או שומעים כביש.
לפעמים זה יותר.
אז זה לא טוב. אז מה...
פתחתם דלתות.
אוקיי, אבל מה...
אני לא יכול לפתור את זה.
אתה לא יכול לפתור את זה, זה sound, it's really loud.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any movement on here when those go off.
What? Movement? Why do you need movement?
No, do these move whenever the microphone goes? Never mind.
Okay, we'll
Go backwards.
Go back to Ingrid and say about Ingrid and Silva. Yeah, just go back.
Ask me the question.
Yes. So what was the most motivating activity you did with the 35s?
For me, the most motivating activity we did was with Silva Zalmanson, who took on the role of
Ingrid Bergman.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. You want to go to another question and then come back to this, because I think we are...
Okay,
we're
let's do that.
We're repeating this.
Right.
that's actually the last question. Okay. Yeah. Do you have another question? That was the last question. Ingrid Bergman, I wanted to ask about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's also in here. In what way do you feel the Leningrad?
No, we had that. Oh.
Kind of. You kind of had it. You didn't,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you
True.
didn't specifically have it.
Okay. So, in what way do you feel that the Leningrad trial affected the world?
Put the subject of Soviet juries on the platform. Of Soviet Jewry, on the platform. People hadn't heard about it before. And suddenly they heard about it. It was one of the bravest and most effective things that... Yeah, okay, we'll go back.
And if you could say Leningrad trials.
I would do that, yeah.
Okay.
Forgot, sorry.
Oh no, totally not your fault. This is how. Okay. So how would
Okay.
you feel? In what way did the Leningrad trial affected the world?
The Leningrad trial put the subject of Soviet Jewry, the plight of Soviet Jewry, on the world map. Previously, people hadn't heard about it. If they had, it didn't mean much, or they didn't understand it. I'm talking about people at large, not just Jews. So the subject was put on the world map by this action, which was the bravest action a group of people could have taken. And you know, yesterday, I want to tell you, yesterday, I met a young couple, a very glamorous young couple from the Soviet Union who were living here, and the guy was in high tech and she was a model, and I said, my hairdresser said to them, tomorrow, because she is going to have an interview on the subject of Soviet Jewry, and they looked blank. And I said, you know, you guys don't really know anything, do you? You think that you applied for a visa and you left the Soviet Union. But you know, there were very brave people who did very brave things to change the path for you and that gave you the right to be able to emigrate. And they know nothing. They knew nothing and they know nothing.
Can you tell me about the medallion you're wearing?
Right, this is, here we are, Silva Salmonson. And here is Silva Salmonson and Kuznetsov. And so these medallions we made right in the beginning of the campaign because it was a very easy way for people to constantly carry what they wanted to say. Wherever they went, somebody would be able to say to them, oh, who's that? And they could explain who Silva Salmonson was, or Kuznetsov, or generally the story of Soviet Jews. It was an effective way of doing it.
And Ingrid Bergman was wearing that as well, right?
Of
so
course.
Why don't you tell me about the first activity you had with Ingrid Bergman?
The first time I met Ingrid Bergman, I think she was somewhere acting, she was doing something, and we met. And I asked her if she would participate in the campaign. She was a very fine girl, terrific, and she agreed. And then came the idea of having this luncheon, and I had already given her a pendant. So she arrived actually wearing her pendant, and she wore it a lot. I had seen photographs, but I knew that she said she wore it a lot. And I believe that she was in contact. She certainly wrote to Silva.
Can you tell me about the activity you did with the Passover dinner? With the prisoner dinner, sorry.
You know, first of all, we invited all the members of Parliament, religious leaders, and of course the press. And
Cut. Let's do cut. And
Yeah.
can you? Okay.
Doreen, take 2.
So tell me about the most interesting activities you've done with the 35s.
Well, for me, I think one of the most motivating demonstrations that we held was when we invited press, members of parliament, VIPs generally, to a prisoner's lunch, when Ingrid Bergman took the role of Sylva Salmonson. She had a very beautiful voice, and she explained the plight, and everybody in the room was in tears. Now, we took everybody through a very narrow black passage where they had to stamp their fingerprint and receive a number and go through the process of, so to speak, going into prison. And then they sat down at long tables on long benches and had placed in front of them a tin plate with dry herring and very dry bread. So it was effective, and people talked about it. You know, everybody was chatting back. There was a tremendous buzz in the room. So a whole room of people were all discussing the subject. It wasn't that they couldn't talk about anything else because it was so much in front of them. But can I slot in something? A demonstration that we had, I think one of the most effective, not necessarily the most motivating, but tremendously effective, was when the Bolshoi Ballet came to London. I believe that we were able to make the Soviet government realize that they couldn't float around the world without being told about what they were doing. Before the Bolshoi came, there was a tremendous buzz. Nobody knew where they were going to be staying, what was going to happen to them. And the press were phoning us all the time. Where are the Bolshoi going to be staying? What are you going to be doing? On the Saturday before they came, and we had no idea that they were coming the next day, could have been a day later, I had a basset hound, and my basset hound roamed off. We had to drive to Battersea Dogs Home in order to pick up, to see if the basset hound was there. We picked him up, and on the way back, as we passed over Mile End Road, we looked down and saw Sadler's Wells rehearsal rooms, and we saw two black cars stop sharply in front of them, and men with big shouldered coats get out and big hats, and we said, that's it. And we stopped our car and raced down to this position and hid our car around the corner. When they came out, we followed the car. It went to a hotel by the Houses of Parliament. We got out of the car. I had a big hat on and dark glasses. The other girls, we all had stuff in the car always, so we didn't look exactly like us. Went in and we booked rooms. We stood next to them. We heard when they're checking in, they were putting a warning on the reception that they've got to be careful because there'll be maybe demonstrators who will find them. And we booked room, and we also booked the big reception room that was down on the ground floor. And we pulled all of our prison stuff out very quickly and went and decorated this reception room completely as a prison with banners, etc. And when the Bolshoi, first of all, before even that, because it gives an idea of what was happening, we sat in cars the next day outside the hotel, all sitting all around the hotel in cars, waiting for the Bolshoi to arrive. And we turned the radio on, and we heard the 1:00 news saying, the Bolshoi Ballet have arrived at London Airport. and the 35s are not here to meet them. No Soviet Jewry demonstrations are here to meet them. It really indicates something. Then they arrived at the hotel. They had no idea. They were totally taken by surprise. And we jumped out of the cars, and there we surrounded them completely. They were in total shock. These poor dancers, they were probably, I felt so sorry for them. But, we really had not attacked them physically, but surrounded them. And so, and we hid in the cars together with us, of course, journalists. We had we didn't have journalists. And then they went into the hotel. Now, the next day when they came down for breakfast, as the first person came down, we opened the doors, double doors of this room, which was decorated. And they didn't realize what was happening, so we invited them in. And they all came in and walked around a Soviet Jewry exhibition. And it took time till their security men muscled them all out, but meantime, journalists had a story. So this was it. We always had to have a story that the press could ask the question, why are you here? But in this case, I think it was a real effective confrontation between us and the Soviet Union.
I know now you know that the reason the death sentence was reduced was because Golda was speaking with Franco, but then you didn't know. So I'm asking a question to back then, Doreen, didn't know. So after 8 days after the death sentence, it was reduced. What did you feel when you heard the news that this death sentence was reduced? That the USSR kind of backing down a little bit?
Yeah. When we heard the result of the trial and that the death sentence had been reduced, relief was the first. But very important what it did to us, because it spoke to us and it said, if you take action, somebody hears you. If you do nothing, nobody hears you. So from then on, it gave us, it lifted our backbone up and it gave us a lot more muscle power in our arms. And I think every action like that gave us that encouragement to continue. We needed it very badly because it wasn't easy doing these things. There was once a Soviet football team came to London, and we went to look at the place first, and we saw these railings. And it was very much easier. There wasn't the security that there is today, of course. And I tested it, and I found that I could squeeze through the railing. So we booked front row seats for the football match, and at a certain point, we said, okay, girls, on. And we squeezed through the railings. Now, the picture that made the press was the girl who was fatter and got stuck between the railing. Now, that wasn't easy for her, and it wasn't easy for all of us. And the very difficult thing was when the security people would come and whisk us off, because they weren't always that gentle. But the girl stuck between the railings, it was terrific that she did it, and she did it with great spirit. So I think these things, are little things in our memory that, as we think about it, it comes back to us. There were a lot of funny things that happened all the way through. So it's the funny as well as the serious that made the campaign.
Brian, do you have another question?
Just really quickly for you, what did it mean? What did it mean to you to be part of the 35s?
But answer me.
Answer her.
Yeah.
For me, to be part of the 35s meant that I was standing up as a Jew and speaking out and not quietly accepting whatever was dished out. Maybe I would like to explain something further to you. When we started, we thought we were going to demonstrate. The first day, we demonstrated for the first day, and then we realized that somebody hears. So we continued demonstrating. But gradually, and with the help of the Helsinki Agreement, the Helsinki Agreement was for us a tool. It was like every cameraman's camera and every sound man's microphone. We went to the Foreign Office in Britain and we said to them, we want to learn more about the Helsinki Agreement. And they said, don't even bother with it. It's never going to go further. It's on the piece of paper. The Russians want it because they want to ratify their borders, but they won't want to be involved in human rights. It'll never take off. We got our teeth into the human rights section, like, what's the dog? A bulldog, you know, that puts your teeth in. And in Russia, in the Soviet Union, Sharansky and other people got their teeth into it. So there we were, both with our teeth into this piece of paper, and we helped build it up, no question. And then, of course, we became involved with each of the different governments. So we were no longer just demonstrators, we were involved with governments. And we were so so detailed in making sure that every piece of information we gave out was correct, that by this stage, whichever government we gave material to accepted it with willingness and began to rely on us for information. And the first time we held a demonstration abroad, where we went with 14 different countries. So imagine women from 14 different countries all demonstrating together. Nobody quite knew what to do with us because they didn't want to really arrest us, but they had to arrest us because we were in places where we shouldn't be demonstrating. But each time the Americans, the Canadians, most of the governments would say to us, we need your information because you've got the detail. We only have the subject matter. It's your detail that will give us the tools with which to speak. So when I think back on the campaign and when I think back of my personal involvement, I realize that the campaign, I always say to everybody who does anything for charity or in any form of doing for others, one gets much more out of it than one puts in. And the Soviet Jewry campaign gave me the possibility to stand up and be a proud Jew and a proud human being.
It's marvelous.
That was wonderful.
It is. Kat, we just need to do some visuals quickly.
Are you just